Commission Board meeting of March 24th, 2025 to order. First up is roll call.
Herval,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
and Knight is absent. Walsh,
Here.
Glickler,
Here.
Kirkwood.
Here.
Seeing that we have a quorum, I'm going to move on to item number 2, approval of minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes from March 10th? Do we have any corrections, concerns, questions? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I hear
Second.
second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Glicker and seconded by Commissioner
Walsh.
Walsh. Any discussion? None? All in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. All right, moving on to Section 3, citizen comment. The Charter Commission welcomes any comments at this time. Do we have anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll move on to item number 4, consider and possible action. Consider nominations to select vice chair for the 2025 Charter Review Commission. Jennifer? Vice chair, did you have anything?
So we had a resignation last meeting. We had a resignation, and that was our vice chair. So we want to open it up to nominations for a new vice chair in the event that Ms. Herval is absent.
I nominate Lila Knight because she's not here.
I'll second that.
Do we have any discussion? No? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There you go. There you have it. All right. That was easy. Moving on to item number 4.3. Consider approval of recommended changes to Articles 4 and, Articles 6 and 7 of the City Charter. Ms. Reed. Is it Elkhorn Reed?
It is, but that's okay. I answered both.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Amy Alcorn Reed, City Attorney for the record. We're looking for the red line item. If we can get that up from the back. Should be a Word document. I think maybe Jennifer's going to share it. Okay. So this is the red line I put together for Articles 6 and 7. The first change was in 6.04. That one's relatively minor. It's just adding federal where it talks about state.
Everybody good with the modification to Section 6.04?
Yes.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Ms. Ford, seconded by Mr. Glicker. Any discussion? Please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes.
The next one is 6.06, and this is where I took a shot at kind of reversing the process so that when we get an initiative petition or a referendum petition, when a resident brings in their proposed petition, then the city secretary would accept it and place the time and date when she receives the petition, and then she would give it to the city attorney, who would review whether the proposed petition complies with the city charter's rules for initiative and referendum, and then whether such ordinance that's proposed in an initiative is legal.
Okay, I think this is a better progression than what we had before, because like she was saying, the people could go through all their effort and turn in the petition and then have it said, nope, it's illegal.
Okay.
So taking care of it, the attorney doing their part beforehand to determine whether it's a legal opinion, they can still debate it, they can still push it through if they want to, right?
Right, but then they would know. Oh, no, they could not. Actually, it would not be subject to.
So that would kill any
It says that if that happened, the city secretary would return the proposed petition to the petitioner and no further action will be taken. We could change that when they could
Okay.
still go out and get it processed, but they would be doing it with the knowledge that there was an opinion that said that it was not legal and that council would would have been able to under the previous charter, and we might have to leave that in, would be able to not put it on a ballot because there's an opinion that it's not legal. That's what the current process says. So at the end of the day, they have the city attorney give an opinion, and if the city attorney says this isn't legal, it doesn't go on the ballot. And I didn't like that process because that's after 1,000 people have signed it, and I would rather that happen before 1,000 people sign it.
I agree with that. I believe that's a good thought.
So, Commissioner Cooker?
I was just gonna say, this is what I recall us discussing. This looks like how we talked it through, so.
So what, walk me through, what's the appeal process if they don't agree with your decision? Or there is none?
There's not one under the current charter either. It would, I guess, be a lawsuit.
Okay.
We could add an appeals process. I don't know who it would go to at that point.
Okay.
I mean, does the charter need to include language that puts the onus on the petitioner once the city attorney has given their legal opinion?
But typically, if it's an initiative ordinance and it's a matter of like something in the ordinance isn't legal, they could redraft that, or they could even ask, that I redraft it. I'd be okay with that. It's really when it's not subject to referendum or initiative because of one of the reasons listed in the charter that it becomes problematic. Because if I say, no, that's not subject to initiative because it's an appropriation of funds, then there's no real way to get around that. They'd have to take out all the appropriation of funds in order to do that.
I'm comfortable with it, how it reads. I mean, it happens so rarely and infrequently. And the time frame to create the possibility of an appeal, there's gonna have to be a lawsuit to another level anyway. And I think there's probably state laws that govern that.
I will admit that this happened to me in my previous city, but the way it happened to me in my previous city was the way I just stated, where there was a single section that we thought was not legal, and we adjusted the way it was written to make it legal.
I'm also
So-
comfortable with the way it's written currently, or with her red line anyway.
So when they made the adjustment, they presented it to you once again, and you were able to say, it's legal.
So that charter had a different provision. It said that the city attorney was then required to draft it in legal form. And so
Ah.
my office drafted it in legal form, and we took it to city council for review.
I kind of like that.
Adding that to this, then?
I don't know if that's in there. I can add something about that, that if possible, I'll draft it in legal form, if it's a curable issue.
I think it's there in the middle of the paragraph. If an initiative ordinance can be adjusted to a form that the city attorney agrees is legal, the city attorney will provide an ordinance in legal form that can be circulated. So I think it's there.
Okay.
I-
I thought I put it there, but
You did.
I've
Yep.
slept since then, so.
Okay.
I move to approve.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
6.07, we discussed adding language that the city secretary's designees could examine the signatures. And then we talked about changing the timeline from 14 days to 15 business days. I added this language about other method of communication because I feel like certified mail really kind of slows it down. And if a petitioner is okay with us giving notice by email, that'd be much faster. So I'd like to give the petitioner that option. And then we made the same changes to the amount of time that the petitioner has to recirculate for more signatures, so that's 15 business days as well.
Okay. Anybody have any comments in regards to section 6.07, the changes?
How does our current city secretary feel about the proposed changes?
No?
I think for sure the other agreed method of communication, most people use email. So it takes a lot longer, and if they can't get to the post office to sign for their certified mail, it just is much more inconvenient. So I really like that, and I think the days and the designees, it all just makes sense.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve? All the changes to 6.07.
Motion to
Motion.
approve.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Ford, seconded by Mr. Walsh. Any discussion? Seeing none? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The next change was to 6.09, and this was the attempt to remove the later review by the city attorney, which we've now moved up earlier in the process.
Move to approve.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right.
I think the next change is 6.11. 6.11, we added that language that would require the registered voters who sign a recall petition for a person who's in a single-member district, that they would have to be eligible to vote for that.
Elected city officer.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody have any?
Motion to, well,
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Glicker. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. 6.13, limitation on recall. On that one, the direction that I understood from the commission was to change the language regarding the number of times that a person could be recalled during a term of office from 3 to 2, and that's what I did.
Okay. Any discussion? Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Glicker, seconded by Mr. Stewart. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then on 6.15, the direction of the commission was that a non-binding ballot proposition should be allowed to be placed on the ballot by a vote of 5 members of council as opposed to 6, which is what the current charter reads.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none or seeing none? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Okay, 7.01. This was just for clarity. We had at least one member of the commission or one commissioner express some confusion about the way 7.01 was written, and so I wanted to make it clear that it's the city manager who has authority to require a bond from any other employee other than the city manager.
Okay, does anybody have any questions regarding section 7.01? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to approve the changes to 7.01?
Motion to approve.
Motion-
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Glicker. All in favor, please say aye.
And then 7.02 is the last one that I've actually written out as a red line. The rest of them we'll discuss in the next presentations. 7.02 was to clarify that if the city manager is unavailable and has not designated an acting manager, then city council has the authority to do so.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve? Or do we have questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Glicker, seconded by Mr. Walsh. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're picking up with 7.03.
I believe so. But I think that the next item on the agenda is the discussion on the internal auditor, but we can have them in either order, whichever way you'd like to do it.
The internal auditor comes under section, I thought you said it came under section 8.
That might be a reasonable place to put it. We can put it wherever the Charter Review Commission wanted to if we wanted to proceed. That's just the order we posted them. So if you want to switch the order, that's fine with me. Just let us know which item we'll talk about first.
Okay, I would like to I would like to try to finish section 7, at least tonight, for sure, since we started it. So if we could hop down to, what is it, 5.5? Is it 5.5? Yeah, 5.5.
Okay.
Okay,
So the presentation can come up. That one is that one. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is the benchmarking I did on 7.03 and 7.05. We talked about doing some benchmarking on what other cities do. The city of Kyle has 10 peer cities that we benchmark against, and so I benchmarked on all of them. You can see that the language allowing the council to authorize departments upon recommendation of city manager is pretty consistent. So that might be okay to leave as it is, or if we want to change it, we can, but it is pretty consistent. What is different is the requirement that the city council, as opposed to the city manager, approve the personnel policies. 3 of the peer cities require that, and then Pflugerville requires it in very specific circumstances, but not for all personnel policies. It's kind of a weird provision. And if you recall, that's what those discussions were about, was both those provisions contained, 7.03 contained language requiring that city council approve the personnel policies as opposed to the city manager. And then both 7.03 and 7.05 talked about the city council's authority to create and alter departments.
I'm actually okay with how it's written.
Given the fact that it says the council shall approve personal policies and guidelines, I assume that's probably being recommended by either the city manager or HR or a department head or something. So given that it's approval and not creation on the policies and guidelines, I'm okay with it being as it's written as well.
Okay,
I concur.
all right, moving on. We left off at the beginning of a discussion of 7.06, which was the police department. That provision was amended in 2020. I couldn't exactly find what was changed. I think it was the addition of that commission. I'm not sure.
What was the provision?
I think it added B. I think that's what changed in 2020, if I recall correctly.
It add what?
B, subsection B. So subsection A was already there, and I believe it added subsection B.
It was added in November of 2020.
Yeah, I think this section was added because of, at one point, I believe we had, when we were looking for a new chief of police, it became contentious. And so we took the council and the staff kind of out of it. And we collaborated with the committee, and it was citizens and some council members, not a quorum of council members. But that's what we did to help facilitate the hiring process.
Okay. And I believe that was the conversation we were starting last meeting, was the process that the commission believed was the best process to follow if and when we have to replace Chief Burnett. I do want to say, for the record, I've tried very hard not to make recommendations about any particular person's job. So you guys, I'm going to defer to you on this conversation. I'm not going to have recommendations on it.
My own personal thought is if this was just reviewed by another committee a couple of years ago, we've had the same chief for 15, almost 20 years, that I'm comfortable leaving it as is.
I am as well. I mean, we reviewed it at the last Charter Review Commission, and I do believe the Charter Review Commission before that was the one that established this verbiage. Well, or maybe we did in 2020, but I think there was some, we did it because there was, when we hired the current chief, there was some contentiousness going on, so we wanted to mitigate that and find a way to do that.
Okay, we can move on. Fire department, I don't have any recommendations to change this, but I will note that there's a lot of language in here about a volunteer fire department that does not exist currently. But it is all very clearly permissive and not required, and so we can leave it, we can remove it. I don't know that it needs to be removed, though.
I don't know that it needs to be removed. It may need to be, some of the things may be needed to be removed or not it entirely, because don't we need to have something within the charter in the event? I know we have ESD 5, but in the event, God forbid, something happened, the city would have to have something in order to be able to create its own fire department.
And this one is permissive on both. The city can establish a fire department, and the city could also establish a volunteer fire department. Either way, the first paragraph is is a staff fire department, and the second paragraph is a volunteer fire department, but it's all permissive.
Okay.
I don't see a reason to change it if it allows for flexibility of both. Leave it.
I agree.
So we don't, okay, so this is an if and only if type statement, because right now we don't, the city manager doesn't have anything to do with the appointment of the fire chief right now.
Correct, we
But
have
this
an
is
ESD.
just in case the current situation, do we need to mention anything about the current situation?
I don't think we do, because again, this is all permissive language, so my suggestion is really to leave it alone, but of course, I welcome any changes that the commission would like to approve. But my thought is that, it's permissive language, currently we have an ESD, if the ESD were to go away in the future, and I'm certainly not advocating for that, then at that point, the city could establish a fire department that would be an internal city department, just like the police department is. But we would not be required to do so while the ESD still stands. I think we would probably feel compelled to do so if the ESD went away. But while it's still there, I don't think we would have any requirement, and we don't want to have any requirement to create a fire department.
Okay, I'm okay with it standing. I had questions about it, but, okay, I can understand where you're coming from on that one. Makes sense.
Okay, so just hypothetically, so does this mean we couldn't contract with another city or the county to provide fire services?
No.
Strange, I'm just, throwing it out there.
There's other language in the charter that allows us to enter into interlocal agreements with other government entities. So I think that if, say, there was a San Marcos Fire Department that was willing to be a regional fire department, just like their animal shelter is currently, we could do an interlocal.
Okay.
These are the other provisions in Article 7, and I've just provided a little bit about how each of those positions is appointed and who they report to, so that you're aware. Again, I'm not making recommendations on any of these, but I welcome any comments.
I didn't see anything that jumped out at me on these. I'm comfortable with how they read.
The only question I've got is, city secretary recording in full in books kept and assigned by, an index for the purpose. Are y'all still doing that? Are there books of, ordinances? Let's see, is it ordinances?
Do we keep a book of ordinances?
Or the book, it mentions, that you maintain a book kept, an index for the purpose of all ordinances and resolutions. Do you do that, or is it all online now?
It's online.
But it is an index that, we do have an index of all
Yeah.
ordinances, but it's
I've
just
looked.
electronic. Yeah.
It's just not a book, okay.
I have a
A
question.
virtual book.
I have a question. Is it normal for city attorneys to report to the city manager and not directly to council?
So city attorneys are kind of a gamut. In some cities, they're appointed directly by the manager. In some cities, they're appointed directly by council. We have a bit of a hybrid, and I think that was added in 2016, and I think it was done that way intentionally, but I don't know the history. So while I report to the city manager on the day-to-day, the city manager does an evaluation of me and reports back to council, and the council can review it and accept it. I am hired and fired by the council, so at any time, 4 of the council members could remove me from this position. I'm not aware of any other cities that have this exact hybrid, but I don't have any problems with it, and of course, I make no recommendations about my own job.
Anybody have any recommendations in regards to those 7.08, 7.09, 710, and 711?
I have none.
Neither do I.
Okay, let's move on.
All right, this is Article 8, which is on finance. I've pointed out a couple of provisions, but I welcome any comments as we go through. The first one I seem to have pointed out is 8.04, so if anyone has comments about 8.01, 8.02, or 8.03, please let me know.
Any comments about 8.01, 8.02, 8.03, and 8.04?
8.04 I have comments on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I have none on those three.
None? All right.
My comments on 8.04 are pretty similar to some comments I've made on other provisions throughout this process. It's very long. A whole lot of what goes into the annual budget is regulated by state law. I don't have any specific recommendations of things we want to change, but it's just something to think about.
I tried to scan the law. I'm not the best at reading that. But it seemed like it was pretty bare bones. The only thing in here that I liked that wasn't there was the budget shall be arranged to show comparative figures for the previous years. I like that in there. I'd very much like that to stay.
Okay.
If we make any amendments to this at all, I would very much like that part to stay.
I'm not aware of a city that doesn't do that, but I don't know. I can't
It's not
specifically
it's not
cite
in
whether it's
state
required
law.
by
I
state law.
couldn't find it in the state law.
I can't recall exactly where it would be if it is in state law, but every city that I've checked their budget on, they all go back at least a year or two.
I would like to see somewhere, and, because I complain about this every time I come to council. You'll have an item on the agenda, and you should be able to take the agenda item and pinpoint it to where, if some expenditure was to be expended within the budget, right? You should be able to take that item and go to the budget and see the line item that it affects. It's called a fiscal note. And a lot of cities provide that to their citizens, and then they give commentary about it. We used to do that when I was on council. It drives me crazy when I come and I look at the budget, look at the agenda, and I can't go, or if I do my homework before, I can't go to the budget to see where that item was approved in the budget. And I should be able to do that. And that's called a fiscal note. And I don't know if that's something that we put in the charter. I come and complain about it. It's gotten a little bit better, but it's not as detailed as it once was. I don't know what happened.
What did you call it?
It's called a fiscal note. Basically,
Fiscal note.
yeah.
I believe she's talking about the way that the requirement that the finance director confirm that there is money be presented. So at some places present it as a fiscal note, some places have them sign a certificate of funds. It just depends on how it's presented. But there is a requirement that the finance director confirm that the funding is available. I'm trying to figure out exactly where that is.
Is that kind of language, would that apply to 8.04, or would that be applied to a different section of this article? This 804 just looks like the annual presentation.
That's fair. It could go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. The reference I had was 8.02B, that the finance director shall certify the availability of funds for all proposed expenditures, and unless the director of finance shall certify that an unencumbered balance exists in the appropriations and funds available,
Yeah, maybe.
no appropriation shall be encumbered.
When you're doing a purchase change or something, I don't know if that would apply.
So maybe that change would be more appropriate in 8.02.
Well, it's also in 8.06 in the first sentence, in administration of budget, and I think that's what Hannah was alluding to, is, I don't know that 8.04 is the right spot for it, but in the first sentence of 8.06, no payment shall be made or obligation incurred, except in accordance with this charter and appropriation duly made, and unless the director of finance first certifies that a sufficient unencumbered balance and sufficient funds are or will be available to cover the claim, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I think that would be the spot for it.
806, or perhaps even 810, where it talks about purchasing procedures. That
Yeah.
feels like a good place for a line item.
That's what,
Do you want us to benchmark that too and see what other cities have on fiscal requirements?
please.
Okay, we
Yeah.
can do that.
It's just a personal bone of contention.
Well, you're not the only one, because when it comes to the fact that I'm paying taxes, I wanna know where my tax dollars are going. So, I'm right there with you.
I'll even give an example. I'll find one from when I was on council.
Okay. I don't think I'm going to go so far as benchmarking what other people put in their agendas, but I will benchmark charter provisions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on 8.04? The only one that I do want to point out on here that's a little weird is this subsection I.
I had a question about that.
Okay.
Should probably turn on my mic, my apologies. Health coverage for retired employees, it gives consideration for the years of service, but does not obligate the city to any specific or continuing level of funding for such benefits. Why not?
So we actually have an ordinance on health benefits for retirees, so it's a whole separate thing. I assume it was written that way to have flexibility based on how, whatever direction we decided to take by ordinance at the time. I think it's odd that this specific provision is laid out, and so I'm kind of curious if anyone knows how it got in there. Because it's a very specific situation that generally would not find its way into a charter, because it's such a limited topic.
I don't think this section has been amended in a while. So I think this section has been there for a while, and I think that perhaps maybe they wanted to make sure that they took care of the retired employees. I'd be interested to know how many retired employees we actually have receiving health care coverage.
I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is once they're eligible for Medicare,
They're
then
out?
more or less, yeah. But I don't know. That's typically the way it works.
Okay.
I'd have to go look at the ordinance to tell you exactly how it works.
Okay.
Well, now when you go back and read it in the context of the preceding paragraph, that applies to all these letters. So now what we're saying, to read it properly, the annual budget shall include in separate sections, and there's, estimate rates, itemization, and then, so the annual budget shall include in a separate section a provision
For each
regarding
one.
health coverage. Like, what exactly are we saying
My
here?
guess is it's a budget line item on how much money we have budgeted for retiree health insurance,
Yeah.
but in its own separate section, which.
And then, right, and then on top of that, to say that that provision may give consideration, but shall not obligate, I mean, it doesn't fit in this section. I don't know if there's somewhere else to put it or not. You said there's an ordinance about it, but I feel like this just doesn't fit here, once you read it, linearly.
It feels like the last part maybe belongs in an HR manual of some kind, but the fact that there's a provision as a line item, that makes sense. But it's the second part that maybe doesn't belong in this particular document.
Well, you would want them to make a line item for health care coverage for retired employees.
Right, but the wording about consideration for years of service shall not obligate the city to any specific continual level of funding, like the actual amount they're providing for retirees, that feels like an HR thing. But the fact that we mentioned that there is money for retirees, that belongs here.
I think what you're saying, like the total annual amount of money that's put aside for retiree health insurance is something that would go in the annual budget versus how we determine how much money that is, which may not go in the budget, it may go somewhere else.
Right.
Well, right, and that's, yeah, you've highlighted for me, because, when you go back and look at some of the previous ones, an itemized estimate of the expense, an estimate of the revenues, I mean, I see no problem saying something to the effect of an itemized estimate, expense, whatnot, regarding health coverage for retired employees. The word provision starts throwing you for a loop here.
Right.
And the second sentence, I agree with Hannah as well, that seems more HR manual stuff.
Okay, we could draft it more like, A or D and stick that in there. And then maybe remove the second sentence.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Okay. Anything else on 8.04?
No.
8.05 is on the process and adoption. And again, this is another one that has a lot of detail, and so I just pointed out when there's a lot of detail to see if there's any issue with all of the details. I am going to point out subsection C, because it seems weird that if it's not adopted by the third Thursday of September, then the council takes no action, then the budget submitted by the city manager shall be deemed to have been fully adopted by council. I'm not sure that that's really how the residents, would expect that to happen. I'm also not sure, to be perfectly honest, that we could do that, even if we wanted to.
So you just ignore it and it becomes
Yeah, I don't like that.
budget.
That's what they're saying. Council
Yeah.
just doesn't vote, and that's the budget now.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
I mean, as an example, I used to do a lot of work at the AG's office during legislative sessions, and so like, if the legislature passes a law and the governor takes no action, the law becomes, the governor has to, within a certain timeframe, if the governor ignores it, it becomes a law. That makes sense, but do it with a budget, and that's probably like the number one thing we're electing city council members to take care of. I don't think it should be deemed that way.
And if you think about it, it's kind of the opposite, right? It's like the governor proposing a bill, but the legislature chose not to vote for it, so now it's the law, and that is not,
Right.
it's not standard practice in Texas, to my knowledge.
So, yeah, I would be happy to take C out.
I mean, I think we're okay with leaving that it has to be adopted by the third Thursday in September, but I think that's where I would stop it.
Yeah.
Do we need to state what happens if they don't?
Then they don't have a budget.
Okay, okay, well, that's pretty obvious.
That would be the obvious response.
But aren't there some state laws in regards to?
Yeah, then it would default to the state law, and I can't recall the exact language on there, but there is language on that.
Okay.
Primarily for the tax rate, though, more than the budget. If you don't
Should
adopt-
we include language on the state law as opposed to just taking out the whole last part? Do we need
can.
to explain what happens if, aside from no, there's no budget?
Right, I'm gonna argue the default is state law because there's several provisions in here that say it applies, but happy to put that in instead.
Well, and it does say shall, so that's a mandatory requirement on the council. That would be a breach of their duties if they don't.
Okay. You want me to draft it both ways, or do you want to just,
Let's see it both ways, it's short enough and simple enough.
all right, anything else on 8.05? The next one I have is 8.10, so is there anything on 8.06, 7, 8, or 9?
The next section you have is?
10, 8.10.
10. Anybody have anything on sections 806, 807, 808, 809?
Are we okay with just 4 members of the council for section 807?
That's majority, so
Okay,
I'm good with it because it's the majority.
okay, I should make sure.
8.10 is on the purchasing procedure. This one I pointed out because it has specific language. Like it discusses that all purchases made, contracts executed by the city council shall be pursuant to a requisition from the head of the office, department, or agency. It's just very rigid in the way it's written. So I didn't know if that was something we'd want to change to maybe add more flexibility, or if we're okay with the way it's written.
Well, I feel like the city finance director should be aware of all purchases.
Okay?
After all, he's the finance director, right? I would think that all purchases,
Just as a devil's advocate, if I want to buy a pen and it's $5, do I need to run that by the finance director first?
no, but we obviously have some sort of purchasing
We do.
policy.
We have a purchasing policy. It was approved by council relatively recently.
Okay, right, okay.
Something I see at almost every commissioner's court is they have to vote to approve several places where people have abrogated the purchasing procedure. I mean, they go and buy something for their office. Oh, wait, I didn't do this. So now the Commissioners Court has to come in and say, yeah, we okay that. I never see that in city council. How is that handled in the city?
We have a purchasing policy, so purchases under $3,000 can be made by credit card at the level of the person with a credit card. Between $3,000 and $15,000, I believe, they can be approved by the department director. And then over that, it's either an ACM or the city manager. And then over $50,000, it must go to city council. So anything over $50,000 before the contract is signed will go to city council.
Well, most of this is small equipment for like the deputies and the court officers getting helmets and stuff like that is what I'm seeing. They buy the helmet and they come back and say, oh, sorry, we need to get this. So I just wondered how that was handled in the city because I don't understand why they take it to the Commissioners Court to okay it after the fact.
So if I have something I want to purchase and somebody breaks it up, it's over 50,000. But the entity wants to, how do we circumvent the entity? I would normally have to get it approved because it was over 50,000, right? But if I wanted to be sneaky and I did 2 invoices, or 3 or 4, how can we circumvent that?
The purchasing policy prohibits breaking up items to avoid going over $50,000, if that's your question. So you can't buy, say I need 50 widgets and that's $50,000. I can't buy 25 widgets and then go to the next week and buy 25 more. If it's something that would normally be purchased together, it needs to be purchased together. That's in our policy. It's also in state law.
And there's someone monitoring that?
Yes.
Okay. So who, on the credit card bills, what's the hierarchy of the credit card bills? Do I give my credit card bill to my direct supervisor and they review it to make sure there's no personal purchases?
My understanding is they're all reviewed twice. I can't give you the exact details on how they're reviewed twice off the top of my head, but typically your supervisor or your department head signs off on your credit card, and then the purchasing division that handles those credit cards looks at it as well.
Do I have to give a receipt with the
Yes.
credit card bill?
Receipt, and then we also list the line item in the budget where the money's available.
Okay.
Could we direct the department heads to look over this and advance the issue of fund availability to the
Finance director?
financial director when there's a problem, or?
We do get monthly reports from finance on how much money's in our budget, and so that lets us confirm that money is still in my budget, hasn't been spent yet, I just got this from finance. So if finance has told us the money's available, then we have that to rely on.
Could that act as the cap here instead of having to, as you say, direct every pin in his direction?
Right.
Would there be anything that?
I don't think there's anything in this provision that prohibits what's being done, and I don't see an issue with it. And then my comment on the provision was just that it was very specific in the process. I think that there are ways that this gets done so that the efficiency of the office can continue while still showing that finance has confirmed that this money's in the budget as of this date.
And then there's a person who looks at their checking account and saying, I got plenty of money there because nothing's cleared yet. I ran into that with kids a couple of times. But these are all adults, so.
Well, you hope they're acting as adults.
Oh, was I being,
take a stab at how you want to kind of change this to make it, because I'm all for efficiency, but I'm also for the control side on this piece, so.
Oversight, yeah.
Yeah, I think if I was drafting this new myself, I would put it as a reference to purchasing policies. Basically, all purchases will comply with purchasing policies and will require confirmation of funds in the budget or something along those lines, but I can take a shot at it. If you guys don't like it, we can leave it as is.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, so I skipped 11 and 12, if anyone has comments on those.
Is there a reserve fund?
Yes. I don't know all the details of it, but I'm sure Pervez could provide them.
Except when expended only for emergency, the reserve fund shall over time be funded in an amount equal to at least 25% of the annual operating budget. If the expended reserve fund shall be restored as soon as thereafter as practical. I could swear that not this last council, but the council before that, the reserve fund was spent.
Okay. I can check with finance and we can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Not knowing the financial end myself that well, I would think that if expended, the next time it would be restored is at the next budget process. I could be off.
Generally, if it is practicable to do so at that time.
Okay.
But it does say that it has to be restored. It doesn't say it's an option, right?
Correct. Independent audit is the next one I pointed out, and again, it's because it's a little wordy. So I don't know if we want to change something to make it less wordy. I think all these requirements, I even said on the slide, I think all these requirements are good and they all serve a good purpose. I just didn't know if the commission might want to do something to be somewhat less wordy.
Is each item especially wordy or just the opening paragraph?
Mostly the opening paragraph. Some of these, like B and D, look pretty long, and I'm pretty sure we could say most of that in less words, but again, I'm not sure that it's worth changing just because we can make it shorter. I've just been pointing out where sections are inconsistent or really long.
We can consolidate the language of the first paragraph, but if all the information in there is necessary, short of grammatical preference, I don't know that I would touch it.
Okay. And then I'm going to make my note on E because this is a great transition to the internal auditor, and I'm kind of glad you did them in backwards order. On section E, allows the independent auditor to be, or requires the independent auditor to be available to the city council throughout the year for special projects, audits, reviews, and reports. Which means currently if council wanted to see, hey, is there a problem in this department, they could require the independent auditor to do that, do an audit of that situation. And that's all I have.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions or concerns about, I guess, 813 and, or 814, the debt management policy? Is there, I'd be interested to see the debt management policy. I don't know if it's been revised since
It will be on the agenda April 1st if you'd like to attend the meeting.
April 1st. Okay, well, I guess I would like to circle back or reserve the right to circle back to 8/14 after that council meeting to see. April 1st, April Fool's Day, interesting.
It's a good day to talk about that, right?
It is a good day to talk about that. Okay, any questions or concerns about section 8.13? So, as I said last meeting, I'd really like to see the city consider adding a position or a division of an internal auditor. As we grow, I think that what I'm hearing and seeing, we have some issues in regards to transparency, accountability, who's responsible for what. I think that we need to have some procedures in place, and that person be totally independent of the finance director and the city manager and report directly to council.
If I can get the person in the back to pull up the presentation on the internal auditor.
Okay?
So I did benchmarking on this as well, as we discussed last meeting. So I'd like to go through that, and then I'm happy to take any questions and deal with, and respond to any comments or whatever you'd like me to do. So again, I pointed out the independent auditor provision, just so that you're aware of what's currently in our charter. This is what's currently in our charter. You guys asked me to do some benchmarking, so I've done that. These are our 10 peer cities that we benchmark everything to. Out of these 10 cities, the only ones that have a mandatory internal auditor currently are Austin and San Antonio. I did notice in looking at San Marcos's charter that it does have some language that allows an internal auditor, but it does not require one. I also did a comprehensive survey to the best of my ability. I sent an email out to city attorneys around the state and asked, does your city have an internal auditor? So that I could look at it. So through that process, I found 13 other cities with internal auditors, one of which was my previous city, so I just knew about that one. Out of these cities, Galveston's the only one with a population under 100,000. Most of them have pretty high populations. I also identified 3 cities that previously had an internal auditor but no longer do. So that's Plano and Irving. They had their city manager decided to hire an auditor without a requirement in the charter, and so those auditors reported to the city manager. And then the city of Bryan has a charter provision for an auditor, but allows for an external contractor, and that's what they have currently. It's an external contractor as the auditor. These are the cities that I found that do currently have city auditors. I've included the population, who the auditor reports to, and the staff of the audit division or department. You can see the staff kind of goes down with the population, but based on that benchmarking, I would imagine we would need at least 2, because none of these cities have less than 2 in staff. So I talked to HR about kind of the costs of staff, and the thought is that for a single internal auditor between salary and benefits, it's likely close to $200,000, maybe a little more annually. And then adding additional staff, it could be another $100,000 in salary and benefits in order to create that position, if it's a mandatory full-time position. So some options that I've provided is to either continue with our current independent auditor and understand that the city council could use that independent auditor to do some of that function. To recommend that an auditor be added to the charter for appointment by city council, that would be maybe a mandatory city auditor, or to add language that would allow but not require either the city manager or the city council to hire an auditor. So that way it's permissive and not mandatory language, and at the time that the council deems that it's appropriate, they could appoint somebody.
Do we know what the current independent auditor costs the city?
I don't off the top of my head.
Well, barring something bizarre in that economic number, I feel like option 3, in my opinion, is best right now. I think that's a tremendous amount of money for a department that almost basically no other city besides Galveston utilizes, but it's not a bad idea to have a permissive city auditor in the event that something develops in the future.
And I'll note that this would also be in addition to the current independent auditor, so we're not recommending removing the current independent audit, that would remain. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, right, that's the other thing too, is the city auditor wouldn't necessarily be completely independent.
What's the benefit of having both an independent and an internal auditor, aside from the time factor?
With my experience from a large city, we did have both. We had an internal auditor and we had an independent auditor. And the independent auditor would do our annual budget audit, just like the auditor that arrived, I think it was last council meeting, did here. And then the internal auditor would look more at complaints about specific contracts, complaints about specific departments, complaints about specific fees, and dig into more.
So internal does
Specific
more
things.
day-to-day, week-to-week, smaller items, whereas the independent does the larger, more annual items.
Right, that's the way it's worked. I came from Corpus Christi, that's the way it worked there.
They would look for indications of fraud, abuse, illegal acts. They would look at management to see if we have established adequate internal controls to safeguard our assets. City resources and public funds are utilized economically and efficiently and effectively. They would look for that. Financial and other reports are being provided and disclosed fairly, accurately, and fully, and all information is required by law. They assess financial and performance risks, review the financial auditor's results, consider requests and suggestions from the city council and city management. I mean, they do a lot. When you do the benchmark cities, are you basing it off of what populace?
When I did the benchmark cities for the 13, I sent it to the general listserv for every city attorney in the state of Texas
Okay.
that we all use. I did not get response from all of them, obviously.
But you base our population on what?
Our population? About 65,
Okay.
but I'm not really sure on those numbers. That's just a guess, because our most recent census was 40-something, and based on the growth numbers that we have out of planning and other departments, I tend to hear somewhere between 60 and 70.
There was a couple of cities on your list, I believe, that you said they had an internal auditor and now they don't.
Right, Plano and Irving, I think.
Interesting I'd be interested to know what happened that they went away from that model as opposed to,
I don't know those specific cities.
Okay.
I could ask. A lot of times, something like that, it's literally as simple as the person in the position resigns and they never replace them.
and they never, okay, yeah, that's true. Okay.
Or is there also something in a charter can very similar to option 3?
I don't think so, but I can check.
Okay.
What is the feasibility, and this is someone who doesn't have a great deal of background on this, of having the internal auditor and the independent auditor be one and the same position, as just expanding the duties of that one person or staff of 2, as opposed to hiring 2 brand-new people?
I think there's a big benefit in an independent audit for the large comprehensive annual budget audit. It complies with your, I have to think of the word now, your general government accounting principles. You want to make sure that you're complying with those. You're having an independent review of your financial records. And I'd have to check as to whether or not that's actually required by state law, but it might be. And if it's not, again, it does comply with your requirements as a government to have an independent audit.
I mean, I agree, Madam Chair, that all of those responsibilities of an internal auditor are great and necessary. I was just trying to workshop some economic feasibility if we're looking at 200,000 plus per year.
So the option that I would suggest if you wanted to do that would be for council to use this subsection E in 8.13 and have the independent auditor kind of take on some of the functions that an internal auditor might do by doing their own reviews of things that council's concerned are not being handled properly or that they just want a review of.
That might be a decent compromise.
Well, I'll just say this. I hear it over and over and over again. We're trying to reach this gold standard capability or gold standard benchmark or whatever. I just feel like an internal auditor is one more feather in our cap to be gold standard. I feel if we're exercising all the requirements of financial feasibility and transparency, all too many times, I hear, you just hear it. You come to the council meetings, you hear it over and over again. Financial transparency is lacking, and that's not because of the finance director. That's the overall operation, I feel. Something is amiss, I'll just say. And so that's why I felt like this was a way to accommodate and resolve those issues, was to put it in the charter or compromise. I'm not, I can compromise.
I've heard at least one suggestion for option 3, which puts permissive but not required language in the charter.
But-
And then I've heard
Well-
one to basically leave it as is. So-
I was just about to ask that question is, I read E to say that the council could have the independent auditor do throughout the year special projects, audits, reviews, and reports. Is it a matter of maybe lack of education and knowledge that they could, I know that there's been talk in the community about a lack of transparency, but is the issue the fact that, like, it's right there that it can be done, it's not being utilized? And I don't know where in Charter Review Commission our responsibility or ability to say, hey, you can, you can do this. And, if the answer is, well, we're not going to, then it highlights the reason why you might want to go to an internal auditor, but it seems like you have the ability to do this. It's just not being utilized as much as it should be, maybe.
Yeah, I can't speak to the history on whether or not we've used the independent auditor to do these audits. It hasn't happened in the 1 year that I've been here, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened previously.
In one of the earlier pages on this presentation, did you say that the city council had been looking at this, or did I misread that?
No, I don't think I said that the city council had
Okay.
been looking at this.
Because I didn't print
I
this
believe I
one
said
out.
that this commission asked us to look at this.
Oh, okay, that I knew.
Yeah, the commission brought this up.
Okay.
And I like the idea as well. Right, that it needs to be more transparency, but I'm a little caught up with the cost for having an internal audit. So, and I think you mentioned maybe doing it with the same company, and maybe there's some type of contract model we could work on for an internal auditor, not an internal auditor that worked for the city of Kyle, but through a contract of some sort. I don't know, I'm just.
Like a second
throwing it
contracted
out there to
auditor?
say, because I have a little bit of a concern that they would report to the city council, because if the city council has the authority to call an independent audit whenever they need to, and they're not using it, is it because they don't know that they have the ability, or that they don't want? And I'm not accusing anything, I'm placing judgment, I'm just saying, the perception is, there's 1 or 2 reasons why you're not doing an internal audit if you have the capability of doing it, outside the other annual audit, right? So that's one of my concerns is, but to your point, I don't know who else they would report to, right? They shouldn't report to the finance guy. And in my opinion, they shouldn't report to the council. So that kind of leaves you in a conundrum as to who would they report to if they were an internal department.
Yeah, some of the cities that have chosen to have them report to the city manager. Most of the ones where they're mandated in the charter, they report to city council. I think there's one where they report to the audit committee, which is probably a subcommittee of the council, generally is.
And see, the city of Kyle used to have a finance committee, and
Oh, yeah.
we used to throw things to the finance committee before we engaged the public or we engaged ourselves. Because that finance committee was made up of individuals in the finance industry. And we got a tremendous amount of benefit from that finance committee. And maybe that's something as well. Put a provision in here in regards to the fact of something like option 3, and maybe also having a committee, a finance committee. Of all the committees we have,
Yeah.
that one was removed.
So you're looking for a finance committee of independent residents as opposed to a subcommittee of council? I've seen it done both ways. So I just wanted to-
Independent residents
Okay.
with a finance background. Whether they work in finance, banking,
Is that something you want to add to the charter as well?
sure.
That may be something, that may be the way to start it, yeah,
Uh.
yeah, I agree.
Any objection to calling it a finance commission because of the way we name our boards, commissions, and committees?
That's fine.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with that. I'm just kidding.
just checking.
Stuart, we're going to put you on there.
No.
I can draft something up. I'm trying to figure out the appropriate place to add the finance committee that you've talked about, so I'll look at it and I'll put some language together. It sounds like potentially option 3 for the permissive language on the auditor, and then some sort of language regarding a finance commission.
Yes.
And maybe that committee could be the one that would control, or, I'm sorry, commission, that commission would be the one that could control those.
Oh, yeah, we could throw it back to the committee if they feel that an outside audit or an internal audit needed to be done.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, and let me give a little analogy to something. District attorneys in our state, when they want to indict somebody for a felony, they have to take the case before a grand jury and get 9 votes to do that. And the grand juries for a long time have become, there's a perception in the justice system that grand jury's going to do whatever the district attorney says. When I worked at the Attorney General's office, because I did public integrity cases, grand juries actually have a whole lot more power than just hearing what the DA says and then passing down an indictment. They can issue subpoenas, they can conduct their own investigations. And district attorneys didn't like it when me and my team went into counties to use the grand jury as an investigative tool, because we would teach the grand jury what they really had the power to do. And they were like, well, how come nobody ever told us this? It was because the DA just wants you to hand down his drug and murder indictments, and yeah, that's all they want from you. But the truth is, and they said, well, I heard about this in our community, can we do? And I'd show them the law, and the district attorneys would get mad at us. But in the same vein, so what I'm envisioning in the same vein is if we had a commission in place and the commission understood what E means, the commission's gonna say, look, we're gonna, we want to bring the auditor on for this project or this audit or this review. So there are always people and commissions and committees and things of that nature that have more power than they're being told. And I mean, I think if we had started with a commission, we could get and explained and they understood what their scope and capacity was, it'd be a good thing for the city.
Ms. Kirkland, did you have something to?
I was just going to mention that, when you put a committee in the charter, and you don't define what their mission's going to be, what their qualifications are going to be, there's a lot that goes into that, and all the boards and commissions fall under the city secretary's purview. And so, just cautioning to be really clear about what those qualifications, should they follow alongside the main, we have like a section of main qualifications and main requirements and stuff like that? Or, would this be completely separate?
I think some of her benchmark cities in their charters, they define the finance audit commissions. And maybe we can use some of that or find it.
And then the other risky part of it is that if it's in the charter and we come across an issue, we can't easily amend the qualifications and those kind of things. So like all of our other boards and commissions are by ordinance that, it establishes the board, the commission, what their qualifications are, what their terms of office are, just all of those nitty-gritty details. I wouldn't recommend putting those in a charter where they can't easily be amended.
Yeah, to add to that, I've had a lot of commissions or committees in my time that when you have the really stringent requirements, like they have to be, a property owner in this limited area, they have to own a business in this limited area, or they have to be of a certain profession. Sometimes you have trouble filling those positions, and then if you can't change the requirement, then you're just gonna have a vacancy until somebody who happens to meet those very specific requirements comes along. So maybe it would be better to put some flexible suggestive language about who should be on it and then allow the city council to then adopt an ordinance that's more structured on what the requirements would be.
I look forward to what you bring us.
But I'll benchmark finance and audit committees and let you know. I will say, most of the ones that I've seen just randomly looking at charters, the audit committee is a subcommittee of the council. So we'll have to look at some that don't do that.
I could swear College Station.
Okay, I'll look at College Station, thank you.
I could swear that's the one I was looking at. Okay. Anybody else have any other?
I believe the next item then is the public hearing.
Okay, public hearing. Okay, item number 6. At this time, it's 7:43, is that right? 7:43. I'll open it up for public hearing. At this time, if we have any citizens that would like to speak on any item that we have on the agenda, we'd like to hear your opinions. Seeing none, I will close public hearing at 6:44.
7:44.
7:44, I'm sorry, 7:44.
And before we adjourn, what's our homework?
So our homework is going to be, go over the revisions, and then,
9's pretty short, so probably at least 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
I was thinking the same.
Maybe 11, but it looks kind of long.
Well, the flip side is we don't meet for 3 weeks now.
Okay.
But are we on track to meet?
oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because in the deadline,
Oh, I
like
thought-
June or July?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We have to present by July 15th.
July 15th.
July 15th.
So I think we've got a little time. I think we'll get through this and have some
okay.
time
We
to
have
go
5
through.
That's okay.
sections left, and 9 is 1 page.
Yeah.
So we said 9 and 10?
9 and 10 and maybe 11.
9, 10, 11 being a question mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we were doing 7 last time, we didn't make it through. So if we don't make it through 11, if we get started and don't make it through, that's fine.
Yeah, we can finish it at the next one.
We've got a precedent.
And when is our next meeting?
April 7th?
April 7th.
No, April 14th.
We are meeting on the 2nd and
Right.
4th.
4th Mondays.
Right.
So second Monday would be April 14th. And then the
Yep, you're
4th
right.
would be April 28th.
4/14. All right, thank you.
Okay, and when we, just for, when we go over section 10, I'm interested to note, especially section 10.02, when was the last comprehensive plan adopted by the city?
I'll get that for you.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments, suggestions?
I suggest we adjourn.
Okay, so moved. All right, it's 7:45. Thank you, guys. I know you had a long day.